Okay, hi folks. Baba here again. Uh, I decided to make a little video. I'm playing in the backyard with Metta, our dog, and you might be wondering what the noise is, and it's a waterfall, which is right there. So it's always noisy here, but hopefully the audio is good enough for this short video. So among playing with Metta, I came to think of something that we just 2 days ago finished our annual summer retreat here in Slovenia. And one thing that we discussed, a topic which I often discuss when teaching, is enlightenment methods, uh, which is a pretty obvious topic in this uh, field of work. But, it's something like when we practice and as our practice progresses, you start to see things over time. You see the same things differently. And one thing that I have spoken of a lot during my time as a teacher is the efficacy of practice methods. So, practically how traditions of enlightenment, commonly spoken of as traditions of Dharma, yoga, internal yogas, meditation, awakening, how effective or ineffective they are. And I just started thinking about the state of humankind, humanity, and I just had this thought that, traditions have really failed humanity. Not only they have failed practitioners who practice, were fortunate and had the merit to meet and practice those methods, but there's a bigger failing in that, which is the failing of humanity. And I would perhaps even say that failing of humanity's trust, losing the trust of humanity towards enlightened methods. And then something that I mentioned in passing during the retreat is that how can you say that something is a method or a time-tested method if it only randomly produces the sought result and promised result? In my book, that's not a method. So what method means is that method is based on theory, or the so-called view, like it's called in Buddhism. And then that view is, practiced through collection of practices. So a method is a collection of practices and theory. But if the method doesn't give the result consistently, but very randomly, in my book, that's not a method. So there's this confusion, like if some tradition is old and time tested simply because it has existed for a long period of time, many think that this is good, like this is authentic, this is real. But no, it is not, because my criteria has been that any tradition that is an enlightenment tradition, enlightenment method, they need to prove the method every generation. So there needs to be a fully enlightened being, as enlightened as the Buddha, as enlightened as the Christ, in every generation of practitioners. But this is far from, and that's the kind of the minimum requirement, that there would be one person per generation. Because, many lineages, like whatever lineages we're talking about in Mahayana, Vajrayana, and so on, these higher vehicles, lineages and traditions are many, and practitioners are millions in the world. Uh, so millions and millions of people. But when there isn't even a single fully enlightened person that graduates uh, all purification practices, all practices, what is that? It's lottery. It's a completely random, and in my book, that's not a method. So it's a really low standard for, like, if you think about it, that uh, traditions consist of sanghas, groups that might be very small or very big. Sanghas might have just few members or hundreds or perhaps even thousands of members. But it's a really low criteria to just demand one proof in each generation. I think it's even that is a low standard. But if we really, like, if we think about this, if we think of refrigerators, fridges that everybody has at home, and you go and buy a fridge, but then they sell you some, they don't know if it really works or not, if it actually does the job of a fridge. And if that was the case, that 99 out of 100 fridges, you would buy them, you would take them home and plug the electricity, but then you wouldn't know if it works or not, if you can actually use it. This is a fitting analogy of the so-called time-tested Enlightenment traditions and their methods. Completely unreliable regarding the final goal. And that doesn't mean that there couldn't be some lesser benefits, lesser advancement, but Mahayana and Vajrayana Dharma doesn't exist for lesser results, does it? So this Mahayana is the vehicle to Buddhahood. So this is what I wanted to say. Baba's evening rant. But yeah, isn't it a good question? Isn't it a very logical question to ask, that when there is this hype and promise and desire and need for people to reach the supreme enlightenment, like, there needs to be proof, methods. Every single tradition and method needs to prove themselves all the time. You cannot, if we start thinking that it worked for some Zen master 100 or 200 or 300 years ago, what about all the generations after that master and before? Is this not a valid question? I'm same thing with every single tradition. They need to prove themselves, just like every refrigerator manufacturer needs to prove themselves. If you pay the full price of a fridge and then it doesn't work, you go and complain and they give you a working, functional fridge. But this is just lousy how it is nowadays, because they say that, well, that's an authentic fridge, and you just have to manage with it. Yeah. I didn't mean to say this in an upsetting way to anybody, just as a pragmatic comment, but I find it tragic and comical at the same time, what the state of the art of enlightenment, methods of enlightenment, dharma, yoga, what it is nowadays. And I really feel the tragical part of it is that humanity is in the state where it is. If we had fully enlightened beings, I don't know how many Mahayana traditions and Vajrayana traditions there are altogether, but probably few hundred different lineages at least. So there should be few hundred fully enlightened Mahasiddhas walking around and showing themselves to people that this is possible for you because everybody has the same Buddha nature. So there should be at least few hundred around the world. If there was one single person per generation, per tradition. But this is not the case. This is far from how it is. These people, these people don't exist. These Mahasiddhas don't exist. Bloody hell! Like, yeah, I think that bodhisattva work has so grandly failed the humanity. And something that I often think about relation to this, whether or not humanity's trust and interest towards Dharma can be returned or not. I think the only way to return it is to have those enlightened beings walk around, show people that this is what it is, this is what it looks like, and here's how you can attain it. This is my view anyway. So sorry if I upset anybody. If you're not happy with it, it's not my fault. Take responsibility of your own reactions and do your own practice. Okay. I wish you the best and see you in the next one. Bless you, everybody. Bless you. Bye.